Welcome to the Tree and Garden Gift Company. We're demonstrating today how Franco, George and James and myself Rob are going to show how to demonstrate planting of bare rooted trees, a very traditional way of planting trees. 30-40 years ago that was the only way of planting trees because they were grown out in the nursery fields where they were watered by nature and there was no need to individually water them or feed them. They were grown in fields and then undercut several times to create a really strong root system, and then when they were asleep in the winter from about the middle of November onwards they would be lifted, what we call bare rooted. It's really quite big trees that would be 12 or 14 feet or 14-16 feet in length, but very, very light because they don't have any soil on the roots, and as long as the roots are wrapped they'll last for several weeks like that, quite happy in a state of dormancy. So that's the type of tree we're going to plant today. And so first of all we'll clear away the mulch that's been used to suppress the weeds in this flower bed that was prepared last year. The particular type of tree we're planting today is a really gorgeous ornamental cherry called Prunus Mount Fuji. And Mount Fuji in the spring is a spectacular mountain with a cloth cap of snow on top, and Mount Fuji grows upright to start with, the cherry, and then she becomes quite prostrate in habit, quite flat growing at the top, and then in the spring from about late April onwards she is covered in this stunning white blossom that looks like snow on top of the mountain, hence the name Prunus Mount Fuji. So we're digging a hole. The hole actually doesn't have to be much bigger than the actual root ball itself, otherwise the surrounding soil is just too loose. And the conventional wisdom now is that when we backfill in a minute, we will backfill largely with the soil that's coming out, as long as that's a reasonable soil. Otherwise, if you backfill with imported soil, the tree thinks that's such a beautiful roast dinner to live in that it tends to deter its roots from growing out into the surrounding soil, which is obviously what you want to do in the long term. Obviously Franco and I at this stage leave the boys to do the hard work. So if we look at the soil that's being dug out at the moment, it's a beautiful friable material with lots and lots of compost and organic matter in there already. There's a little bit of grit and gravel. There's very little clay. It only just holds its shape. It's an absolute perfect planting medium for trees in this situation. It really doesn't need improving at all with any other organic matter. There are other situations on this same garden where you've got a bedrock of like solid clay, and there the situation has to be dramatically improved before you can plant. We're now offering up the tree and exposing for the first time the tree roots. You mustn't do this until the last possible moment because those roots are very liable to dry out quite quickly. Even as little as an hour can dry out tree roots and severely compromise the future prosperity of this tree. So we've got quite a nice tight hole here. You'll see the root structure is very, very small, but what's important is that it's been cut. The main roots have been cut many times before it's arrived to us over several years. This is a process called undercutting, and it encourages this big fibrous rooting system, which is what we could otherwise call the feeder roots for the tree, and they're the all-important roots. These are just the anchor roots really, and so it's these that we really want to protect and make sure they're just underneath the surface. So that neatly brings me on to another really important issue, is of establishing that you're planting this tree at the right level. There's a critical line called the nursery line, which is where the roots effectively join the main stem of the tree. It's quite difficult sometimes to actually establish exactly where that is, but you can see that it is approximately here. And the critical thing is that you mustn't have the soil level above that level, because otherwise it will cause rot to set in. Not immediately, but over the next few years, and that will almost certainly cause the tree to fail. And even Franco here is pointing out that it's so important to check that level is right. And you can simply do it by establishing that as a level.
And I think actually that is a little bit low. I think we'll bring that up by about 1 inch by backfilling, and then we'll offer the tree back up again.
What we've just done is put in a single tree stake. There's lots of ways of staking trees. In this case we decided to go for the single stake option, driven straight through, but making sure we've avoided the roots. So we've done that before we've backfilled, so we're not damaging any of the roots. The next thing is we always make sure that this is on the windward side of the tree. So the wind comes that way from the west, so the wind will then blow the tree away from the stake during gales and the like, so it won't rub on the stake. So that's an easy way of doing that. So but before we tie it all on, we're just going to put now some magic powder on. First of all, we make the tree roots just a little bit damp, and that's going to encourage the magic powder to stick onto the tree roots. The magic powder is actually a thing called mycorrhizal fungal solution, which we dust onto the roots, and this has a symbiotic relationship with the tree and makes available nutrients that otherwise wouldn't be available to the tree, and then as a result of photosynthesis the tree will provide nutrients to the fungi, and the fungi is naturally occurring in the soil, but this is effectively a tonic, it's an aid, and it dramatically increases the vitality and the ability of the tree to withstand drought and its general overall happiness, basically. So if James puts a little bit of mycorrhizal around the roots, and we put on about 4 or 5 scoops for a tree this size, and believe it or not, that tub, it actually costs £100, but 5 or 6 scoops is not too much, and it's worth it for a tree that's going to be here for 50 or 60, 70 years. So in a minute we'll be gently backfilling, and before we did that, what we could do is to use a length of this perforated pipe, and this is 50mm or 35mm in diameter, and it's got perforation throughout, and one option is to put this around the root and then bring it up against the tree stake, and it's a really easy method of watering directly down into the ground where the roots are, rather than just watering on the surface where evaporation is highest. But we're really lucky in this garden. We've got an automatic irrigation system, and we'll later be putting in what's called a root watering system, so this tree is watered automatically whenever it's required. So we won't put the pipe in today, but normally you would do. So if I hold the tree and the boys can backfill, and so we're going to be backfilling with this gorgeous organic based topsoil that was excavated earlier, and we do it quite gently, and as we do it I would gently lift up and down the tree, so we shake the soil through and all the way around the roots. The other biggest failure in trees is having air pockets, substantial air pockets around the roots. So as you backfill, you gently push down with your foot the soil around the tree roots, making sure you don't damage them, and then give them a... And you can see how the soil is actually settling, and I think at this stage the tree will look after itself, and I'm just going to water it in, because this process also helps make sure that the soil comes in contact with the tree and its roots. So I'll save those bowls for later. I think that might be enough. We'll just turn that down now. So the tree really won't need much watering at this time of year because it is dormant. It's also the 2nd of December, so the winter rains are with us. So it's losing hardly any water at the moment through evaporation through the top because there's no leaves on. And that puddling that we're doing now will just wash all the soil around the roots of the tree. I think we just do with a couple of spadefuls around here. The next stage then is to tie the tree. It's really important to do this correctly so that this tree does not rub on this stake. And just put those bolts back in. So we're going to put a spacer here, and we're going to pull, I think, yeah, this is one of the spacers we use, and it's profiled so that it echoes the shape of the tree stake and the tree. And we normally use a little screw. Like that. Yeah. What we do now is we just screw that screw right the way in so that it doesn't rub onto the tree at all. And that's great, excellent. And then we've now got a perfect pad between the tree and the stake, and you actually make it quite secure, so you can put a little finger down there, so it's got enough room to grow, but it's not so much that it will rub and move with time. And then we just overlap those, a big overlap, and then we put another screw in here, and then when the tree's tie needs adjusting in a year or 18 months, we unscrew it and just release this and then re-screw it. Great. And the last thing, well, two last things, is firstly is to put in the slow release tablets. And for a tree of this size, the guide is 1 tablet per foot. So she is about 12 to 14 feet, and so we need about a dozen tablets. And they're just put into the surface, and these are slow release, and they'll last the tree for about 24 months. And the tree won't need feeding again. She'll be so happy. And then finally, we backfill with the bark that we saved. It's just as important to make sure the bark doesn't come up against that tree stem either. But the bark helps to set off the tree, reduces water loss, and critically it suppresses weeds around the base of the tree. Because although it's quite romantic to have trees growing out of grass, they really hate the competition from grass and weeds for the first few years certainly, and it's much better to keep them free of competition for anything up to 1 metre all the way around. Normally you would then put on a rabbit guard, but this garden is rabbit proof, and personally I just prefer these simple strimmer guards, so that if the gardener was ever strimming in the area or doing something similar with a machine, you've got a bit of physical protection. And so that's the strimmer guard. And we now have Prunus Mount Fuji all ready for spring. Thank you. Close the door.